Among the multitude of executive orders issued yesterday by United States President Donald Trump were several revoking Biden-era executive orders and actions on climate change. Trump also announced he is withdrawing the United States from the International Paris Climate Agreement.
But I'm immediately withdrawing from the unfair, one-sided Paris Climate Accord ripoff. The United States will not sabotage our own industries while China pollutes with impunity. You know, China. Thank you.
Yeah, I remember that was just one of the many that he already has signed in. Donald Trump said yesterday he will revoke nearly 80 executive actions of the administration of former Democratic President Joe Biden, with the Republican U.S. president adding he will also implement an immediate freeze on new regulations and hiring. Trump also signed a withdrawal from, as you heard, the Paris Climate Treaty, including a letter to the United Nations explaining that withdrawal. The announcement, which has been widely expected since Trump won the November 5 presidential election, further threatens the central goal of the agreement to avoid a rise in global temperatures of 1.5 degrees Celsius, a target that appears even more tenuous as last year was the planet's hottest on record. On the line, we've got SABC News International editor Sophie Mokoena. Sophie, yeah, I suppose it shouldn't come as a surprise. We have been expecting all of these different orders to be signed, and this is just the beginning. I mean, he hasn't even slept and woken up to sign more. This was just the first day after he was signed, moments after he signed. But let's focus on this global policy. I mean, how do you think this is going to impact the world?
I think last year at the meeting of countries in relation to COP, it was clear that this is what was going to happen. And you could see that countries were now non-committal in terms of putting money on the table to address climate change challenges. They had to come up with some agreement just to save face. But it was clear that it was not going to be an easy ride in terms of the future of the Paris Agreement in relation to putting money on the table. And we know that when the UN chief arrived in Brazil at the G20 summit, that's something that he spoke about. And the writing was on the wall. And therefore it is no surprise. But this is what's happening. But when you look at the World Health Organization pulling out of the World Health Organization, it was expected. And therefore, as you pointed out earlier on when you were speaking to Sakina, he is delivering on what he said he was going to do first day in office.
Honestly, holding back no punches in doing so. I mean, besides that, it's also, as we see, withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accord, but there's also the issue of the World Health Organization also moving away from that and withdrawing from the World Health Organization. This is, of course, with his reasoning of the handling of COVID. Any impact on that?
Huge impact. You know that America as a country is a major donor in terms of financing the UN agencies, and therefore 16% in terms of revenue or resources comes from the United States of America. And therefore, when you take that kind of amount or the resources, it is going to be very difficult for the World Health Organization to discharge its responsibility. But I think countries must take a blame, because during his tenure, the first time, it was clear that this is what he was going to do. He had then at that time, towards his end of a tenure, announced that he's withdrawing from World Health Organization. What did WHO do the past 4 years, knowing that anything can happen? You might have someone who may decide not to support World Health Organization. And I think this is a moment where countries themselves must reflect. The same with NATO. We know that it doesn't agree that money must be spent on NATO while other countries are not putting enough money. So NATO member countries what are they doing right now to ensure that they put money in terms of ensuring that NATO is what they want it to be. So sometimes people must do introspection. The BRICS, he has just engaged journalists saying that one of the executive orders is aimed at stopping the BRICS member countries from de-dollarization, much as he's having his facts wrong in terms of briefing, because that's not what BRICS is talking about. BRICS is talking about doing business with the national currencies of member countries. But you can see where this thing is going. So BRICS can come back and say we didn't know what impact this is going to have. So 100% tariffs are coming. And therefore, you plan, you strategize as leadership. And that's exactly what Guterres is talking about. Poor, weak global leadership we have right now.
Yeah, certainly. But the now President Donald Trump coming in and many people stamping his leadership moments after taking office. I mean, there is so much more we can talk about. But Sophie, I do need to just let us round off on this question, because we are now obviously sitting in the position of presidency of the G20. There is the World Economic Forum that's currently taking place. There was a lot said last night, a lot of orders that were signed. And this, of course, is going to influence discussions at the World Economic Forum and no doubt make our presidency of the G20 even more challenging. The repercussions for us.
You are correct. Remember, the United States of America is the incoming G20, and therefore South Africa and Brazil must constantly communicate with the United States of America for synergy to prevail. As South Africa is expected to hand over to the United States of America. That engagement between President Ramaphosa and President Joe Biden and President Donald Trump is very, very critical. At the World Economic Forum today, when they start, it's going to be Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump. Yeah. And therefore, the world is going to focus on what are we going to do. The president is going this time to the World Economic Forum, with his head high in terms of the challenges he experienced during the last World Economic Forum just before COVID, where he had to cut his trip short because the challenges of load shedding were so massive and dominating the South African team presence in World Economic Forum in Davos. And this time around, with Dr. Ramaphosa having addressed this issue, I think they will be able to talk to that, but also talk and explain the government of national unity. But I think on the margins, he's going to address those who will be there in relation to South Africa's presidency of the G20 and the theme. I think he will also meet some leaders on the margins of World Economic Forum. The other issue is that I think he still has to go to the AU. At the AU summit this year, he's going to address leaders of Africa about South Africa's chair or the presidency of the G20. During the State of the Nation address, the president will touch on that. And therefore, I think G20, that will be what South Africa will be talking about. And the relationship with America will be crucial.
All right, we'll leave it there.
Particularly on issues of peace and security also. As Trump has said, he is not confident that ceasefire will last in the Middle East.
Okay, all right, we've got to leave it there. SABC News International Editor Sophie Mokoena.